Good evening, and welcome to the 12th annual exhibition of capstone projects from the students in the Master of Arts in Interactive Media program at Elon University. My name is Derek LeCaff, and I'm the program's faculty director. It is my distinct pleasure to introduce this very special event. Last July, these students arrived on Elon's campus, having decided to complete an intensive graduate program in the middle of a global pandemic. That alone should give you a sense of the ambition and dedication possessed by this cohort. They brought previous knowledge and skills in areas ranging from media arts to graphic design to Spanish language to dance choreography. Over the course of 10 months, they researched, designed, and produced a wide range of projects as they learned everything they could about the different domains of interactive media. This evening, the students are showcasing the most significant, ambitious, and personal projects they created in the program. These capstone projects began with intensive audience and user research, were designed to achieve specific goals, and were professionally produced and developed across multiple user-tested drafts and prototypes. As you'll see, the content of these projects is incredibly diverse and vibrant, but every capstone reflects a shared commitment to design principles and understanding a production process. I know you will enjoy these presentations, and I encourage you to engage with these projects and the students afterwards. Each of these polished projects is the endpoint of a long journey. Each student overcame different challenges and made hard decisions to bring an excellent project to fruition. And now, at the end, they're very excited to share these stories.
So I'm going to share my screen. So as Professor Walsh mentioned, my project is titled AutoCorrect, which is a mobile application that I designed with the goal of teaching new drivers about preventative vehicle maintenance. And if you have a smartphone on hand, you can actually open up your camera app and scan this QR code on screen, and you can interact with the prototype. And so some of the goals getting started for this project were to create a mobile experience that would help these target users better understand how their vehicle function and to help keep them safe. My target audience was new drivers because they are the most at risk for a vehicle breakdown that could be prevented by doing proper vehicle maintenance. And so that was one of the big issues that I wanted to address with this project. And then some personal goals for myself were to take the project into from research into design and then to development as well. So as Professor Walsh mentioned, I actually did take the project into Swift UI and created a mobile application that would work as well as the interactive prototype that you can experience on your own screen. So I began the project with a lot of research about what these users are going to need whenever they're interacting with the interface. So what are some of the biggest issues that they're going to experience with their car, how to handle a vehicle breakdown, some warning signs that could indicate a potential breakdown, and then how to do the maintenance that prevents these breakdowns. And so we ended up with 3 main navigation features for the application, which is the breakdown guide, the dashboard light index, and the maintenance simulator. So the breakdown guide explains what to do in the event of an emergency breakdown. The dashboard light index functions very similarly. It looks like a dashboard and you tap on the lights and it explains a bit more about what those lights mean and how to do further research. And then the maintenance simulator takes you through preventative maintenance tasks. So like oil change, filter changes, coolant flush, tire maintenance, anything like that. And so after I went through the research process, I started the designing and building of the prototype, which you can see the video of the walkthrough of the prototype on the screen here. But some of the things that I did that contributed to developing this included user surveys of what this target audience's major questions were, card sorting on information, designing for the target audience, and then testing of both the navigation features, like you'll notice here that it forces the phone to turn sideways. And so testing the navigation of that, as well as the information to make sure that users could understand what was being said. And then development. So as Professor Walsh mentioned, taking this project all the way into development proved to actually be a pretty big challenge because I didn't know that I was going to make it all the way into development. I knew I was going to create the prototype, but I didn't know that I would be able to finish the development process. And that led to a pretty big lesson learned, which was development should inform your design process, not necessarily designing and then taking to development. I learned kind of the hard way that some of the things that I had designed in this prototype were actually really hard to recreate in the development process. And then something else too, this is a big result from the user testing conducted, was that large amounts of information are really hard to process. And so if you've gone through the mobile application on your own screen, you'll see that the breakdown guide was actually the biggest change. Originally, the breakdown guide was just a long body of text that was on the screen that you could scroll through. But after doing the user testing, I decided to break it up and into the acronym LUCK to help users better remember what was said on the screen. And then future iterations, so some changes if I were going to continue developing this project, would be to update the content in the maintenance simulator, to create other tasks for the simulator, and then introduce knowledge tests to help users retain their information. And then I'm going to back out of this and we're going to take a quick walk through the prototype. So this is the prototype on the screen. And so going into the breakdown guide, you can click on this. And so the acronym, like I said, was LUCK. So look for signs of danger, utilize resources, check for problems, and then know when to stop. That's a big deal, is knowing when to stop trying to fix a problem yourself and to go back and let somebody else handle it. And then the dashboard light index, so you can tap on this, your brake alert light, engine oil lights, and then this one will actually take you straight into the maintenance simulator so that you can start learning how to do an oil change and filter change on your own. And so that is the end of the presentation. I'm happy to take any questions that you might have now.
I've got a question.
Okay.
What was the hardest part?
It was definitely taking these things that I had designed, like I'd mentioned, and bringing them into development and realizing like the logo where I'd used that really nice gradient to try and, let me show you guys, to try and make it look like the chameleon paint jobs off of old cars here. It's actually really hard to take into development. And so I had to find a way around that so that I can still keep this design into the development process.
So why was that? Did it have a bunch of filters on it or something?
Well, so since it was made in Adobe Illustrator, there's a very particular way that you have to export it in order to preserve those colors. Otherwise, they end up really splotchy and kind of like they have stripes in them.
Oh.
And,
so what ideas did you have in the design that ended up becoming a headache programmatically?
Well, definitely this accordion menu here, getting that to function the way that it's supposed to was rather difficult, and getting the screens to scroll like they're supposed to in development, that is an issue I'm still working on resolving.
Yeah, I find scrolling to be the most challenging aspect of mobile development. So are we going to see this in the App Store one day?
That's the goal. Ideally, I would like to continue working on developing it and then put it into the App Store, hopefully within the next year. See, I see a question in the chat. Says, how did you determine which vehicles to use? For example, the icons on the dashboard, are they different for other vehicles? I asked because I had what I called a witched hat for several weeks, and it turned out that it meant flat tire. So for that, I used kind of a general, idea of what all of these symbols would typically look like on vehicles. So let me pull that section up. And so for that, these are pretty common. So not every vehicle has these exact ones. These are mostly on some of the newer vehicles. Like a lot of vehicles don't have an alert icon. It's usually only for digital displays. And then this is what the flat tire looks like on a lot of cars with digital displays as well. It's not necessarily one that's always used, or this for the temperature gauge. It depends on the vehicles, but I tried to use the ones that were most universal. So I hope that answers that question. Any other questions?
And I should mention for the participants, for now, we've disabled any sort of unmuting or video sharing. So if you do have a question, please type it in the chat and we will address it. At the end, I'll enable everyone else to share their video and audio but we want just to keep things moving. That's the reason why we've done it.
All right. Well, I think what, am I unmuted? Good. I think what Carol said about how development should inform design is a lesson that a lot of students get in one direction or the other coming out of iMedia. I think it's really what differentiates iMedia graduates from a lot of other people, because they're so often people are pigeonholed where they know design really well, they know programming really well, but they don't know how to make the two interact with each other in a friendly way without causing lots of problems. In fact, that's like most of the problems in the design and development world. So y'all are unicorns. All right, our next presenter, let's see who's next, is Takia. Takia Davy is presenting. Takia, correct me if I pronounce this poorly. Hmmgry.
Yes, Walsh, it's pronounced Hmmgry. You are absolutely right. I'm going to actually share my screen now, so just a second. All right, so hi everyone, I'm Takia Davy. I am a UX UI designer, also an interactive media designer, and I created a mobile application prototype. It's an interactive prototype I made in Adobe XD for my capstone project. So like Walsh mentioned, the name of the application is Hmmgry. And Hmmgry is essentially a meal assistant application with a key feature being the randomizer, and I'll speak about that in depth in just a moment. It's also based around a social network, so it's based on the sharing and communication around food and different cultures and exploring things of that nature. So it's really for food lovers, but everyday people as well. So I feel like everyone will be able to get something out of this type of application. For my project, I focused on 4 E's, I call them, for the goals. And those were to make cooking an easier experience, a more exploratory experience, to boost enthusiasm when it comes to cooking, and to also boost engagement. So I did keep those 4 goals in mind through the beginning to the end of the project as well. This was my design process, and as you guys can see, it was pretty extensive. I stayed in the design and user feedback section for quite a while, where I would either draft certain features or icons and elements like that, or eventually getting a bit more in depth to like drafts of the design and get feedback from users who were both my cohort members in the iMedia program, but also users that I developed relationships with that I was using for testing and feedback and things like that. Some really prominent things that you'll see in this process was the user survey. I did user research through like third-party and like secondary sources, but that was my only primary source before making this project. So I actually was able to get responses from 34 participants, and that helped me get a better understanding of what to put in this app, what was missing from other apps, because there are so many different type of, I would say, meal preparation applications. And so I wanted to make this one as different and unique as possible. And then also the user testing session was very important. I had 2 rounds of that as well. As you all know, with COVID, things are pretty tricky with online, but I actually think that was beneficial for my process because I was able to make a kind of flexible experience for my users. My first user test was a self-directed one that I sent to them. They kind of tested themselves on some of the UI elements like the iconography and buttons and what they thought they meant. And then I used that information to develop the application further. And then my second user test was a Zoom session similar to this one, where I had users interact with the interactive prototype in its like beta version. And then they were able to give me or walk through certain tasks. It was 3 tasks, and that helped me inform the process as well. So I will actually show you guys some of the prototype in a second, but first we'll point out some key things in the interface, starting with the 5 primary screens, I call them. So I have 5 screens in the navigation, and they're at 3 tiers. So the randomizer screen is the main screen, and it's actually what users will log into and see first when they open the application. The point of that was to make it just an easier experience overall and very quick. If I just want a meal suggestion and go, I can open the app, hit randomize and get a meal suggestion and go. But if I want to actually go a bit more in depth with the interface, I can go and explore tier 2, which is the cookbooks and the bites board. I'll show you guys that in just a second. And then tier 3 would be the planner and the shopping list. And that's if I want to use the app for, I guess, a bit more in-depth meal assisting and meal preparation. So I'll show you guys all of those. But also some really cool features I wanted to point out. And again, my users influence all of these decisions, but 2 of my favorites are the culinary passport, which are foods that are solely based on different cultures. They'll have like flag tags that I call them. And so there'll be a recipe with a flag tag, and you can see like if it's a recipe that's French, or if it's, you know, from some different part of the world, and you can search that way. And then also the recipe compare feature, like in case you have a randomized meal and you like it, but you're not sure about it, you can randomize again and then hold it to compare. So I feel like that was good for indecisive people like myself who might need another opinion before they make a decision. Oops. So this is the randomizer screen, and some key things I'll point out here is that there are meal filters that are optional. And so users can have this kind of, I guess, take down their search or filter their search just a bit more. They can add quick prep times and stuff like that. Essentially, my users pretty much said like they had no time. I did survey a lot of students and professors that were in that pool of people, and they didn't have time to cook, and that was one of their reasons. So I wanted to make that an option for just really quick prep time. They can search certain ingredients. If I just want a beef, I can do that. Stuff like that will be available on the randomizer page. The cookbook page is more like a hub for recipes that you have engaged with or you want to engage with in the future, or cook and things like that. And this has more detailed thumbnails for users to make quick decisions, I would say, and it also has featured recipes, things like that. This again is a social network, so you are able to build a profile and follow different people and also upload your own recipes, things of that nature. The bites board, this would be my favorite because I'm a visual person. So it's literally a board with pictures of food. And so users can kind of scroll through this. There's a collapsible menu, so you can pull out the navigation at your leisure and kind of get a further exploration of that. There are boards that have themes like everything that's fried or just cake and stuff like that. So there's cool things like those. And we have a planner. This is the last tier. So this is more to help people like actually plan something. And so if you wanted to sort and just plan a meal by the day of the week, you can do so. A really cool feature with this is that you get suggested meal complements. So if you're making beef pot stickers, it's going to say, yeah, maybe some zucchini noodles might taste good with this or stuff like that. So that's a cool feature. Also, user research helped come up with that idea, helped me come up with that idea. And then lastly, for my primary screens, we have the shopping list. And this is for, of course, users who found a recipe that they're interested in and would like to get the ingredients to make it at home. You can sort based on your recipe, things like that. All right, and I'll actually spend just a few moments walking everyone through the app really quickly. If you want to join me, I'll give you a second to scan the QR code. All righty, and so this is the interface, the interactive prototype. So it has some things are enabled in the interactive prototype. Like, so if I wanted a dessert, quick bite, maybe with a few ingredients in there, I can do that and randomize it. This is the recipe results card that you would get. I can add it to my planner, things like that. Hold it to compare, like I mentioned earlier, and re-randomize. And so now I have 2 options I can choose from, but say that cheesecake still looked good. So I'm gonna go ahead and choose that. I can do things like that. This works similar to like what you would see on other recipe pages. So I have my ingredients, my instructions, nutritions, and then also some reviews from other users, or you can add your reviews as well. Now, certain pages, like I mentioned, have this collapsible menu that you'll see here. So that's really for easier viewing. But this is the page you guys saw before with the cravings for the different things you're craving, or there's actually a secondary menu where things you've made before and want to make again, stuff like that. The Bites board will house the culinary passport, and then something else I didn't get to mention. But before that, you'll see these tags for the countries and stuff like that I was mentioning. But cook-alongs are also a thing featured on this application, and those are essentially just meals that people want to make with each other. So they can schedule a time, be like, hey, I'm making this on Monday. If anyone else would like to make it and share their photo recipe or any alterations that they made, that'd be a cool thing. So I added that as well. Taking you out of this. Here are the curated boards, like I mentioned. So this is all fried food. By the way, I'm sorry if I'm making anyone hungry, but we're almost done. Here's the planner interface, and you can plan for different meal times. So breakfast, lunch, dinner, and then of course it'll change based on that to the different complements. And lastly, the shopping list. So if I can add filters here, just to make it a more controlled experience for users. So say I just wanted to look at beef and broccoli, I can do that. Just penne alla vodka, I can do that, or have everything. And if I wanted to sort by the different grocery type, I can do that as well, and then add it to the cart. So yeah, that is essentially my project. Thank you guys for taking your time to listen.
That's very cool stuff, Takia. And I am familiar with your project, so I went ahead and ate before this presentation.
Good idea. I normally add a disclaimer. I'm sorry, Walsh.
Does anybody have any questions for Takia? We've got a few minutes. Feel free to type in a question into the chat if anybody does. Takia, I had not seen the Bites board, and it is great. I mean, I would set up your app to just open on that page and just scroll through and be like that, especially if I live in a big city, get all the groceries I want. And I think it's a really impressive piece of advanced user interface design, because it seems like you just had a tremendous amount of not just content, but content that had to be grouped, sorted, filtered, categorized, and that has tons of different variables built into it with images and measurements, and if it's a favorite or not. This isn't really a question, I guess.
Thank you.
But, well, I was thinking of you when I was mentioning in the introduction about how we can, and actually Carol actually expanded on this kind of incidentally, but how we could design something, but actually to get it to function is hard. But I thought this was a great example, because everybody understands food, right? We could take any meal and say, okay, that's a breakfast food, and 10 other categories for it, and all of its ingredients and everything. So we just had a million of those in a big set of data. We could programmatically filter everything out with all these little tags or keys, as they usually are referred to. So it could be really overwhelming when you have that many options, I think, in an app. And we're always encouraging y'all, like, keep it simple, keep your capstones, try to trim down your idea, but it's big. It's got a lot of stuff in there. Does anybody else have any questions?
And I'd say, I know we'll have a few moments at the end. So if you want to still
Yes.
it and then just put like in parentheses who it's for, then we can address it afterwards, because I know my presentation is a little longer.
Well, I was wondering if you were mentioning some things that maybe you'd add. I was wondering if you had thought about adding a print option to it.
Print the page.
Yeah, for old people like me.
That's definitely a good idea. I was having like a kind of shared option, share externally, maybe to your email, and even like a kitchen view if you want to have the app open while you're exploring it and like going through the recipe. But that is actually a great idea to add in like a download this page function or print this page function.
Yeah, you know how we like to, us old people like to like, we'll find the directions online, but then we'll print it out of MapQuest and bring it with us in the car, right? So I always want to print out my recipes so I can get food all over them while I'm cooking it. Well, we'll have some time at the end if anyone has additional questions for any of our presenters, but Takia, I'll let you off the hook here. And we're going to transition to our next presenter, who is Matt. And Matt worked on a pretty complicated application dealing with COVID-19. So Matt, you want to take the helm?
Yes. So first, before I share my screen, I'm just going to put in, that is the URL for the app. It may look a little weird on desktop because it was designed for mobile first, so everything's just going to be really oversized. But just want y'all to be aware of that. And so now we will just get on into it. So then just give me one moment. All right. So for my capstone, I create a progressive web app meant to persuade vaccine hesitant parents that vaccines are not just for their children, but also for other children who may have a weakened immune system. So just kind of going over an overview of what we're going to be talking about tonight is, first we're going to be talking about vaccine hesitancy, then we're going to do an overview of the app, then we're going to talk about the research, and then we're going to talk about the process. So let's talk about vaccine hesitancy. So parents are mainly, when the main thing that the parents have when approaching vaccine hesitancy is because they're afraid. And there's been a lot of fear brought up because of Andrew Wakefield publication that there's a link between, that there is an opposed link between autism and vaccines, but there's not, as it's been just proven. But just because of that, has planted a seed of doubt into a lot of parents to just question a lot of medical experts and about why, if vaccines are really safe. So what? So what if a few parents don't vaccinate their children? Why does it matter? Well, the thing is, the less people who vaccinate their children makes it harder for the human species to achieve herd immunity threshold. And this can be really difficult for people who can't get vaccinated, such as infants, pregnant women, people with cancer, or anyone with an immune deficiency that causes them to have a weak immune system that prevents them to be vaccinated. So really, they're relying upon healthy individuals who are able to get vaccinated to be vaccinated to protect them, in order so they're protected. Why did I choose this project? In my opinion, 2020 was the year of misinformation and disinformation. So when more and more people started to not believing doctors, the CDC, or experts about just our health, it put humanity in a dangerous position. Because in this particular situation, not wanting to be vaccinated not only endangers yourself from catching a deadly disease, but others who cannot be vaccinated. Plus, with this whole pandemic continuing to show that vaccine hesitancy is a problem, then my app is becoming more applicable because of that. And originally when I started this project, it wasn't about the COVID-19 vaccine hesitancy. But as we see recently occurring with vaccines becoming more and more available and less people wanting to take them, it's becoming a real problem. So let's talk about the app. Like I said before, I created a progressive web app that addresses the problem of the reduction of parents vaccinating their children. The desired outcome of this app is to persuade vaccine hesitant parents that vaccines are not just for their children, but are needed to protect other children to be vaccinated. Within the app, I use different storytelling techniques and interactive experiences to build an empathetic argument for vaccines. So, after using the app, users will have a firm grasp of herd immunity and the benefits of it. And also, preferably, users will want to vaccinate their children and understand the ramifications of the majority of the population not being vaccinated and how it impacts herd immunity. So here is the link and the QR code for the app, and I will give everyone a moment to scan it while I explain exactly what a PWA is. So just in essence, a PWA is an app that's created using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and it can run on any browser or any device. It's different from a traditional app, such as one for Android or iOS, which can only run in those sort of environments. A PWA bridges the gap. It allows it to run both in Android and iOS systems, and it also can run on desktops. So let's talk a little bit more about the features of the app. First, when you open the app, it explains what herd immunity is in a broad sense. It also includes an animation, which tells the story of an immune weakened child becoming ill with the flu and just the impacts of that. There's also going to be more testimonials added to the app there's also going to be more testimonials from people who have weakened immune systems added in the app and someone who lives with a person with a weakened immune system. There's also a herd immunity simulation that lets users interact with a variety of variables to see how herd immunity works. There's a text adventure where where you become basically the parent of an immunocompromised child, and then you make various decisions within that narrative that goes to an ending. And finally, there is vaccine resources if the parent is persuaded after using the app to tell a parent where to go. And just because it is quite standard to have a way to contact a developer, I did include a contact form in order if there's any issues with the app or any feedback that wants to be given. Let's talk about the research. So I took 4 different avenues when researching in order to creating this app. First, I went to the books, went to academic journals, and looked through why parents are afraid of vaccines and why there is this vaccine hesitancy. And majority of I found was that parents were afraid because of, even though there may not be any sort of side effects from vaccines, just the thought of that there might be some has made them afraid. So I also talked with several strategic comm professors at Elon, and I also talked to an immunologist to figure out the best way to communicate about herd immunity and talk to parents who are vaccines hesitant. From that meeting, I found that we shouldn't come at vaccine hesitant parents with just facts and logic. It has not worked. However many studies we throw at them saying that vaccines are safe, they're important, they're needed, they're not going to believe it. So they advise that taking instead a more emotional and empathetic argument standpoint. So within my app, I try to address that vaccines are not just for their children, but for others as well, really pulling on the emotional heartstrings of parents. I also looked at many news articles that had very many data visualizations about vaccines and showing herd immunity. And that was a big inspiration for making the herd immunity simulation, was those data visualizations. And lastly, just so I make sure I can know the users, I went onto social media platforms of vaccine hesitant parents to figure out how they were communicating with each other and what sort of messages were underlying with them. Let's talk about the process. So first, I created drawings of how I wanted the app to look and function, just very rough sketches. Then I created a style guide to go along with those drawings. I took the drawings and the style guide and created some Illustrator mockups. And then I took a moment just to pause again to create some personas and to capitalize on what the 2 parents and the 2 types of audiences I'm dealing with. And like what I learned from social media was there's 2 types of parents. There are parents who are afraid of all the supposed vaccine reactions and that's causing them to be afraid of those vaccines. And then there's also parents who feel like their rights are being infringed upon when having to vaccinate their child in order to go into school. Finally, I took all those Illustrator mockups and I wired them up in Adobe XD. This allowed me to create a mid-fidelity prototype for user testing. And then after using testing, I created a report and with overlapping feedback for all the changes that need to be made. After that, I began coding it. Then I also used local testing using Google Dev Tools to see how responsive it was and also to run some backend audits. I did some rapid live testing using Firebase. And then I made the subdomain, which I shared with y'all for the app. So the technology used was quite extensive. I used Illustrator and Photoshop for design, XD for testing. My preferred code editor was Atom. I used GitHub for version control and storage, Google DevTools for local screen testing, Firebase for rapid live testing, and Lighthouse for performance, SEO accessibility, and PWA optimization and best practice audits. I also So for the code that went into it, I of course used the basic three, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, but I also used several libraries such as Bootstrap, Sass, jQuery, GreenSock, and email.js. And there you go. We had an app. So what's next? Well, I want to refine the app more and then reach out to individuals to get more testimonies about what it's like to be immunocompromised and also taking care of someone who is. Once the app is in a highly refined state, I want to present it to local state health departments and hopefully have it adopted to them in order to be used to explain herd immunity. And that is my presentation. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you, Matt. That's great. Let's see. We've got a couple of minutes before our next presenter. But rather than opening it up to questioning, let me just ask you, Matt, what did you think was the hardest part of making your project?
Yeah, definitely the hardest part was that herd immunity simulation.
That's what I was going to say.
yeah, because that involved really combining two areas I wasn't super familiar with, JavaScript and then statistics. So, but I got really familiar with both by the end of all of it. So.
Yeah, and I really learned what an R value meant in that process as well. Yeah, that was it's funny when Matt put up the screen of all the different technologies he was using to make the project. They're almost all technologies that I had gone over in the fall and then in the spring. So he like literally was ordering everything off of the menu.
Yeah, it was needed. So, and
yeah, it's a complicated topic. Well, let's keep going, and we can circle back around for questions after our last presentation. We've got 2 left. Thanks again, Matt. And let's see, up next is Alynda. Alynda Pratt is presenting the Curl Garden. Are you ready, Alynda?
Absolutely. I will go ahead and share my screen. So, within the past few years, women of color have faced biases toward their hair, which can result in discouragement and fear to openly wear it. Women of color have been fired from jobs, little brown girls are even suspended from school, all because of their natural hair. The Curl Garden exists to remind these women to embrace their natural hair while also learning how to maintain it. My name is Alynda Pratt, and my capstone project is the Curl Garden. So the Curl Garden is a mobile application prototype created to assist women of color on their natural hair journey. The purpose of this app is to inform users on natural hair care by also serving as a resource hub, while also inspiring users to embrace their natural hair with daily inspirational messages. The motivations and inspiration behind this project was entrepreneurship. Prior to Elon, I maintained a small business dedicated to creating shea butter hair products for women of color to style their natural hair with. My passion for creating hair care products transferred over to creating a mobile application for women with natural hair. So before I show the final product, I think it's important to highlight my design thinking process. In order to create a user-friendly product, I utilize a design thinking approach to ensure my target audience can have a product that was useful. So my process begins with me empathizing with potential users. I conducted a survey that asked participants to express some pain points associated with their natural hair journey. I surveyed 28 participants with this survey. The process allowed me to identify problems women encounter on their hair journey, which resulted in me stepping out of my own assumptions and understanding the problems of my target audience. So defining the problem. This stage allowed me to hone in on the core problems of the users. Based on the survey, I identified that young African-American women needed help with determining hair porosity, wash day tips, hair growth tips, and methods to apply products. This stage allowed me to begin gathering ideas to establish features, functions, and any other elements that will allow me to solve the problems within the mobile application. Ideation. So my ideation process included me creating sketches to generate ideas. I decided to create 4 main features within the app to address the problems I identified from potential users. Those features included a stylist tip feature, an interactive quiz to touch on hair porosity, which was a problem identified in the survey, a journal function, and a method feature to utilize with the hair care products. So during my prototyping phase, I created mockups and static designs. Here's a look at the first version of the Curl Garden. I designed these screens using Adobe Illustrator. Throughout this process, I received feedback from my project family and members of the cohort who fit my target audience. Based on the feedback I received, I would revisit the design and make changes based on the feedback. So as you can see, I went through several changes in my design process. I changed colors based on what potential users resonated with. I scaled back from 2 quizzes to 1 based on the time that I had to create. I also utilized Adobe XD to piece together my design screens. This stage of my process taught me to value the feedback I received to create stronger designs. For testing, I conducted a user test survey to test the features and functionality of my prototype. Based on the results of my test, I learned that the icons I designed for a particular page weren't resonating with the users. They couldn't understand what the icons meant. So from there, I revisited the ideation stage of my design thinking process. After redesigning the icons, I tested again with another user test survey. So my process required me to revisit stages and redesign quite often. I learned to appreciate feedback and to test often so that my users can understand the designs. In the end, I walked away with a great prototype that put the needs of the users at every stage. Here's how you can get in contact with me via Gmail and LinkedIn. Now let's take a look at the final version of the Curl Garden. So this is the landing page for the Curl Garden. Users will be able to log in or sign up for free. So I'll walk you through that process. So from here, you can create an account. As you can see, it's an email and a password page, and then you can just create the account. And then we have the landing page. And you also see those 4 features that I created based on the pain points that the users in my survey identified. So, and you also get to see an inspirational message here, which goes back into the goal of this prototype teaching African-American women how to embrace their hair. So the rose for the day is, my hair doesn't need to be fixed. Society's view of beauty is what's broken. And then I'll just walk you all through certain features and functions. We have the hair care quiz, and it focuses on hair porosity because, again, some users identified that a pain point was trying to learn hair porosity, and this quiz allows them to do that through the use of questions. And then in the end, based on answering, you'll receive your hair porosity results. And then we have the hair care tips page, and all of these tips were based on the 28 respondents in my user test survey when they identified pain points that they encountered on their hair journey. So like I said, they wanted wash day tips. They wanted to know how to grow their hair. They wanted to know how to repair damaged hair. So this is why I chose these functions for the styling tips page. And I also touched on in the presentation, redesigning icons. These were the icons that I redesigned because prior they weren't resonating with users. They didn't understand what they meant. So I went through a redesigning phase for these icons. Here's what a potential page looks like. And then we have the journal feature for users just to talk about their hair journey. They can click on dates to see things that they said and things that they might have mentioned on their hair care journey. And they also can add entries by just pressing on the pen icon. And then we have the LLC versus the LCO, which relates back to users wanting to know more about hair care products. And this page will allow them to do so. And those are the main 4 functions of the site. I hope you all enjoyed, and thank you.
Thank you, Alynda. That was really cool. It's an extremely impressive looking app. I'm impressed with how you took feedback, not just on your surveys for the content, but also on how to redesign the app itself. I was wondering if there was any social aspect to the app, or if there could be in the future where you could share with other users. Yeah.
I absolutely think that's a great idea. And I think it would be a great social opportunity for people to be able to connect, maybe through the journal feature or just by sharing hair care tips with each other.
All right. Well, your timing is also pretty amazing, because this I've been hearing this topic more and more and more of late, and it just seems like you landed right at the right time to make this prototype. It's perfect. Well, again, in the interest of staying on schedule, I'm going to keep us going and be the only person hogging the question microphone here, but we'll have time after our last presentation for anyone to catch up with questions for any of our presenters. Thanks again, Alynda. I'm going to try to hand the reins over now to Madeleine. Actually, Madeleine, we're a little bit early. Is that okay? Are you ready? Okay, good. Go for it.
All right. So my name is Madeleine Horrell, and the capstone project that I am presenting today is Leaf. So like everyone else, I have QR codes. My project actually takes the form of a website and a PWA. You can find the PWA on the website, but if you would like to look at either of them, these are here. Like all the other projects, the link is also on the Capstone 21 website. So the very, very early days of my project, my plan was to create a progressive web app for children between the ages of 5 and 10, so elementary age children, that teaches them about local species and helps nature and nature engagement through fun exploratory tasks. And this goal was based off of research that I did about the negative effects of a lack of engagement with nature and the benefits of engaging with nature in early childhood. These benefits include the basics of just getting exercise, feeling mentally and physically healthy, but there's also a lot of educational benefits. It promotes reflective learning and experiential learning, so learning through doing things and not just learning through being in a classroom. So I'm designing for children, and I'm designing with the specific goal of education, which drove all of my design. So I started with personas. As you can see, I have a lot of them because I have 3 audiences. My primary audience is children, elementary age children in the state of North Carolina. But since children aren't exposing themselves to media at this age, it was important to me to include my secondary audiences of parents and guardians. So that is Chris and Eliza, and then my tertiary audiences of educators. So that is Ranger, Amy, and Madison. So from these personas, I started building my app and what features I might need. Along with them, my early research, I also made a brand manual. This is just 4 pages to show examples of the logos that I designed, how I chose my fonts, and how I chose my colors. Again, just basing it off of designing for children, making sure that it's fun and bright and it pops, but not too distracting since it is still educational. About halfway through this process, I changed my mind, which is why instead of just being a PWA, now you have a link to a website as well. I decided to do this for a couple of different reasons. I wanted to produce more content instead of just one coded project, and I also was having a lot of trouble with my PWA and what I wanted it to do. So I took a bunch of the ideas that I had for the PWA and I put them on a website. So my new goals were to set up this website, use Bootstrap to create custom CSS and deploy my PWA through Firebase hosting. Like Matt already touched on, I used HTML, CSS, and JavaScript to build this PWA, tested it locally before deploying. Here's examples of some of the content that I wanted to collect. I spent a lot of weekends this semester out in some of the lovely state parks that North Carolina has to offer. I took photo content and video content, which you can see on the website, along with my original tasks and nature information. So currently, the website has 24 featured species, a link to the PWA, as well as the tasks that I made in a printable version. So obviously this is an interactive media program, but for some people it's going to be easier to print out the tasks and read them, and then an about page just to say what it is about, explain to parents or teachers what the importance of engaging your kids with nature at this age is, and some other basic stuff. So this is about what it looks like. We have the home page on the top left or right, which I don't know what it's showing up for you guys, but the one with the tree is the home page, and then the two with the 3 columns of boxes are the learn page, and the last one is an example of one of the species pages. So the idea is that kids and their parents or guardians or educators would look at this website first. They would use it to learn about some of the great species around them, because one of the easiest things to do is to teach them how to recognize something. No kid is going to be able to engage with nature and, you know, appreciate a cardinal and know things about it if they can't recognize a cardinal. And then we have the app, which consists of these tasks. They are vague enough that they should be able to be used in any situation, whether that's out in a national park or in your backyard. And the idea is just to promote engagement with nature through mindfulness and being self-reflective. So really thinking about what they're seeing, hearing, experiencing in the moment. This is a vertical slice of the ideal project, which means it is very focused. I used North Carolina only, since that is where we are right now, and it is for elementary school students. The PWA does have pretty limited capabilities, but since it's a PWA, the benefit is that you can download it and you can even use it offline, which is going to be really helpful if you are, say, in a national park. You might not have service on the top of a mountain. I plan to continue working on this as I go on, but currently as is, I just wanted to show the website a little bit more, because one of the funnest things that I got to do was design for kids, which I don't always get to do. So I've got these fun effects. And then if we take a look at the PWA, as you can see, here's an example. Let's say you go outside, you do it, done, it leaves. And then whenever you're done, you can just start over and look at the tasks again. So thank you. Any questions?
Anyone have questions for Madeleine? I mean, of course I do.
I do.
Yeah.
If you had to pick like a second location to expand and do this, you know, again, where do you think you would do?
Alaska.
Nice. Yeah. Good pick.
Madeleine, it seems like your content, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's not just animals, right? It's like, well, not just wildlife, but it's flora and fauna, right?
That is correct. It's actually divided into 3 categories. So when I said 24 species, what I meant was 24 pages divided into animals, plants, and phenomena, which is kind of a big word for 5-year-olds, but I don't want to talk down to the 10-year-olds. So that includes things that you could see in nature that aren't necessarily a plant or an animal, such as a nest. Not going to be able to know what a nest is if you haven't read about it and seen a picture first. So.
It looks like we have a question in the chat. Any thoughts about partnering with educational students and ABSS for testing?
I don't know what ABSS means, but I think, yeah. So one of the problems I encountered was that it was difficult for me to do user testing, because the idea is that I would need a bunch of children and access to the outdoors and their parents' permission to do all this. So I would definitely love to move forward with that if possible. I think it would be a really good way to make sure that it's very kid friendly, the language and the functionality is all accessible to children. Alamance Burlington school system. Got it. Yeah, that'd be cool.
It seems like you had a really complicated situation with defining your audience, and I know that can make an app or really anything really complicated, especially from a user interface design. So did you end up deciding like to have essentially one interface that would be appealing to all of the audiences rather than break the experience up into 3 different experiences or something like that?
Yes, definitely one interface that is designed more to appeal to my primary audience, which is elementary age children. But the about page is mostly where the parents and or educators would come in, because it's not just saying what LEAF is about, it's introducing them a little bit to why LEAF is important and why engaging kids with nature at that age is important. So mostly all the same, basically just the first one. Savannah. How does the app address pre-literate children or children who can't read? The best answer I have for that is that it is actually fully accessibly designed. So it is accessible for screen readers, both the app and the PWA. So I completely followed the ADA guidelines on accessibility for that. So screen readers, but also with kids who are pre-literate or that young and can't read, presumably they would have the help of a parent.
Yeah, I can speak from experience on that one, that going around controlling the app in nature and then showing the results of the kids. So you don't want to give them the phone though. Any other questions for Madeleine? Well, it's great work, Madeleine. I really like that app. We can open up the questions to all of our presenters now. So if anyone, yeah.
I was gonna say, I'll just enable
thanks, Matt.
Yeah. So just so we can, yeah.
To remind everybody, we had Carol Ann Friday presenting autocorrect, followed by Takia Davy, who made Hmmgry. Matt Harrell, who you see now, probably, made Have You Heard? Alynda Pratt with the Curl Garden. And our last presenter was Madeleine Horrell with Leaf.
And everyone should be able to now share their screen. I'm sorry, turn on their video and unmute themselves if they want to ask a question or to interact with any of the presenters tonight.
Well, I got to say, these are really complicated projects as projects go. And some of the projects that we saw tonight are in prototype mode. Some of them are going to be in the App Store soon. So we've got a wide range of how far along we got with the programming. But what I was impressed with is how willing this cohort was to try the programming aspect of their project rather than saying, I'm just going to make a prototype. I think everyone that made a prototype went all in on trying to make it functional first. And I think that's great. And that led to some really good prototyping with interaction in XD, which I think is great. But I'd say the one thing y'all share is that interaction between design and development and how difficult it is. Madeleine, I believe when you switched gears to your new idea for your project, you had to relearn SAS in order to rewrite the variables for Bootstrap to make a custom site, right? So that's a good example of how y'all took what you learned both in the fall and in the spring and just went off on your own and figured stuff out. And I think that's, I think your projects are a good testament to that as well. Well, anyone else? Any questions, thoughts, ideas?
Were there any computer science people in this group, or did everyone just learn this? And
I don't think anybody was coming from computer science this year. We occasionally have
very
a couple
impressive.
of people.
Yeah,
Yeah, we
Very impressive stuff.
Another cohort member has a minor in computer science, but he's not in this group.
yeah, and interestingly, wasn't in the application development class. So much of the more advanced programming that we did, yeah, starting from scratch last well, August, I guess it was, right? So yeah, it got really challenging to keep track of all the different things that y'all were programming, I think, while learning design and video. Pretty impressive. Well, I also feel like everybody managed to use their project to kind of showcase the aspect of themselves that they wanted to kind of promote. So I think y'all will be able to use these to launch into your careers, which is the point, right?
Speaking of careers, I'm going to put in the chat everyone's LinkedIn profile. And just in case if you've seen any of these presentations, like, hey, that person would be great to hire. So yeah.
And if you're thinking that, I will vouch for any of these excellent students. It's hard. This is a hard program. It requires 100% of your time. If you have a job coming into the program, or we're usually like, see if you can leave that job to do this. It really takes all of your time. And I think especially this year with the added difficulties we had and how everything took a little bit longer. And it just speaking about all the programming that they all learned this year, you learned via Zoom. It shows a really impressive perseverance, I think, in this cohort. And it points to a positive future. Well, if we don't have any more questions, I guess we should wrap things up. Sound good, everybody?
Sounds good. Thank you all for coming. We really appreciate it. So
yeah, excellent work, folks. Congratulations, and congratulations also on graduating tomorrow. It's going to be awesome. All right.
goodbye.
Farewell, everyone.